weeks now, but if y'all run out of songs next week, just sing those same ones again. I've got a list of those that I've been singing. So we don't have a PowerPoint this morning, but I sure do like to have a good picture. It's for me. Thank you, Tyler. Just got a couple of pictures I want to draw this morning because I don't have a PowerPoint because don't have a map to show the map. But when I was back in college years and years ago, I saw this picture just about every day, every time I went to class for years and years and years. And it was the picture of what happened in the Holy Land. Can you see, Maddie? Can y'all see over there? Everybody see all right? It was a picture basically of the Holy Land. This little line right here represents the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Sea of Galilee. This is the Jordan River, and this is the Dead Sea right down here. And right here, just to the east of the Jordan River, east of the top of the Dead Sea, is Jerusalem right there. We talked about that over and over. By the way, kids, the prayer that we had this morning, the people were right here in Jordan, and they crossed over the land right there. Actually, they went over into Jericho, the first place they took. I drew that picture this morning because, by the way, this whole region right here, back in the Old Testament, was called Judea. It was kind of like a state or a province. It was called Judea. And you remember with me who was in charge of the world at that time? The Romans were in charge. And the Romans had a little headquarters set up here in this region of Judea. This was Jerusalem. It was the most prominent city in Judea. But right up here on the coast, there was a beautiful city called Caesarea. And that's where the Roman governor or procurator, his name was procurator, he's kind of like a governor, the Caesar Augustus, the Roman emperor, was over there in Rome. But in each of these little provinces, he had a governor or a procurator. And in this province of Judea, that guy's headquarters was right there on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. A beautiful place. I wrote that to you because last week we ended with the procurator named Felix leaving office. And the next guy that came in behind him was named Porcius Festus. Remember that? I don't know if any of you ladies are pregnant this morning and you're looking for a name for your child, but Porcius Festus just feels like somebody ought to name their kid. And when I was typing Porcius Festus in my notes, spell check got a hold of it and changed it to Precious Festus. So if you're looking for a name for your kid, maybe you can call your kid Precious Festus. For 2 years, Paul had been brought up here and was in prison in the house where Festus lived, where Felix lived. The Jews were trying to get rid of Paul. They staged a coup against him. Paul's nephew told on them. They grabbed Paul up in the middle of the night. They took him up into Caesarea. He stood before Felix. Felix couldn't find anything wrong with him, but didn't want to let him go because of the Jews. And so he just kept him there in the palace, in house arrest in the palace. Wouldn't that be a great place to be in jail? And had many conversations with Paul. And Felix said, I don't find any reason for you to be in jail. But the problem is, all of these Jews will put political pressure on me. I don't want to let you go. So he kicked the can down the road for 2 years. After 2 years, Felix left the scene and Porcius Festus came on the scene. And Felix, as a parting thing to the Jews, as he waved goodbye to them, he said to Festus, Festus, there's this guy in jail right here. His name's Paul. He's a great guy. I've had my wife. We've had conversations. I brought my wife Drusilla, and we've talked to Paul. He's a great guy, but I'm just not ready to let him go. Now the Jews, you're going to hear from the Jews, and they don't want to let you go. That's where we ended last week. He's just passed the torch to the new procurator. The last verse of Acts chapter 24 says, after 2 years had passed, Felix received a successor, Precious Festus, and because he wished to do a favor for the Jews, Felix left Paul in prison. So today, Dr. Luke, who wrote the book of Acts, is going to give us the next story, the next episode in this ongoing drama of Paul being in prison again. That was last week's title. Probably the title for a while. So let me read for you. I want to read for you 9 verses from Acts chapter 25 this morning.
3 days after Festus arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. He went from here to here. Now, it looks like he went down south. Why does it say he went up? Well, it's because the city of Jerusalem was up on a hill. So throughout the Bible, when you hear about people going to Jerusalem, they go up to Jerusalem. So Festus and Felix, they had their little transfer of power and a little inauguration ceremony. Had been there 3 days, and he said, I think I wanted to take a trip to the most significant city in all of Judea because I really want to gain their favor politically, just like we saw Felix do. When he got there from Caesarea to Jerusalem, verse 2, the chief priests and the leaders of the Jews presented their case against Paul to him, and they appealed, asking him to do them a favor against Paul, that he might summon him back to Jerusalem. They were preparing an ambush along the road to kill him. It's not the first time we've seen that. However, Festus answered that Paul should be kept up here in Caesarea and that he himself was about to go there shortly. Hey, I visited you all. I'm about to go back home. And so he says, therefore, let the men of authority among you go down with me and accuse him if there's anything wrong. Verse 6, Luke says, when he had spent not more, I don't remember what it was, a week and a half, Luke says, he spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them. He went down to Caesarea. The next day, seated at the judge's bench, he commanded Paul to be brought in. When he arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem to Caesarea stood around him and brought many serious charges that they were not able to prove. While Paul made the defense that neither against the Jewish law, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I sinned at all. I'm innocent. I don't belong. There's no reason for me to be on trial. I'm innocent. Then Festus, wanting to do a favor for the Jews, they're up here in Caesarea, he said to Paul, Paul, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem there to be tried before me on these charges? Paul, are you willing to go back here and have a hearing here in the jurisdiction of Jerusalem? But Paul said, look, Mr. Festus, I am here standing at Caesar's tribunal. I'm in a Roman court. I'm a Roman citizen. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm right here and I want to stay right here. I'm standing at Caesar's tribunal where I ought to be tried. I've done no wrong to the Jews, as you can see very well. If then I've done any wrong or have anything deserving of death, I don't refuse to die if I've done something wrong. But if there's nothing to what these men accuse me of, nobody can give me up. You can't, in good faith, give me up to the Jews, because you know, Brother Festus, that I haven't done anything wrong. And then Paul, he's got his ace of spades. This is his last trump card that he pulls out of his pocket in this moment. He says, I appeal to Caesar. He's saying, I'm done with this. I would rather stand before the Roman Emperor Caesar than I would go up to Jerusalem. I'm done. I'm a Roman citizen. I have every right to claim this. I'm claiming my trump card. I appeal to Caesar. Festus called a little break there. He said, we have a 10-minute break and I want to talk with my advisory council. After Festus conferred with his council, he replied, Paul, you have appealed to Caesar over here in Rome. To Caesar you will go. That's today's episode of the life of Paul being in jail. You know, as we've been studying for these last few weeks, I focused heavily on Paul and his perspective and how he was doing. Now, I just want to switch our focus this morning, and I want us to talk about the religious focus in this story today. Verse 2 tells us that the chief priests and the leaders of the Jews presented their case. These chief priests, they knew the rules. All of them. You ever been in church and you feel like you know the rules or don't know the rules, or you wonder what the rules are? These guys knew the rules. You ever wonder about all those rules in the Old Testament? Just ask the chief priests. They knew all of them. They lived by them, and they enforced them. You know, if they caught a woman in adultery, They were ready to grab a pile of stones for a different reason and stone her to death. You remember that? But Clayton, God gave us those rules in the Old Testament. Why did He give those rules? The Bible tells us that God gave us the rules in the Old Testament to be teachers to us, to prove it to us that we can't keep the rules. You see, back in the Garden of Eden on day one, God gave Adam and Eve one little rule, and they couldn't keep it. And then God later writes down 10 rules to give to the people to try to keep there from being chaos in society. People couldn't keep those 10 rules. And in the Old Testament, He gave hundreds of rules. Why did God give all the rules? It was to prove to Clayton that Clayton couldn't keep the rules. The law, the Old Testament law, was a schoolmaster. It was a teacher to teach us that we could not keep the rules. The trick is, do the rules become our religion? You see, religion will give you a set of rules to follow and a set of traditions to trust, but they will not change man's heart. The tough part about this discussion is, what do you do with the rules? Do you focus on them? Are the rules what you become about? If so, and you've seen this, we've watched this happen many times, probably in our churches, in our own lives, maybe, hopefully not in other churches that we've been a part of. Here's what happens. I call this post-it note Christianity. You, as an individual, will either be very good at the rules and feel very good about yourself because you know all the rules and you keep all the rules, in which case you really don't need God. Think about this. Therefore, a person becomes godlike when they're really good at keeping all of the rules. It is a righteousness that comes from myself. Self-righteous. I keep the rules. Therefore, Greg, I'm watching your life, and you probably need to keep the rules too, because I've got a little bag of rocks in my pocket, and I'm going to keep my eye on it. Or you're either very successful and you keep the rules, or you're finally honest with yourself and you say, I have failed miserably, and I cannot keep the rules. I cannot do that which is right. In which case you experience a tremendous weight, guilt, and shame, which leads to resentment and disillusionment, often resulting in, fine, I can't do it, I'm going to go do my own thing, and we live unrighteously. I want to make just a couple notes about these two responses. Either you're really good and you can keep the rules, or you weren't very successful at keeping the rules and you carry it with you. No, maybe you're like, forget it, I ain't even trying to keep the rules. I resent those people who try to enforce those rules on me under the guise of religion. These two responses. Number one, I keep the rules and feel very good about myself. Do you remember this verse from Isaiah? I've read it several times. But we are all as an unclean thing, and all of our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. And all we do is fade as a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind have carried us away. Do you know what the danger is about having a bunch of rules in your life? And I've got the rules, and to be a good person, you need to do this and this and this and this. If I do those things, then I have convinced myself that I am righteous because I've kept the rules, not really realizing that before a holy God, all of my righteousness is as a filthy rag. The second response, you say, I failed miserably and I feel and know the weight of my guilt and shame. I have a recognition about my unrighteousness. Can I say to you that prepares you to become righteous? You can't become righteous unless you first realize that you're unrighteous. If you're already righteous, can I say to you that you don't need grace? Think about it. Grace is getting what I don't deserve. If I'm already righteous, I don't need grace. not until you see yourself as unrighteous and therefore undeserving that you can get that which is yours. It is the most clever of Satan's tricks to get me to think that I am doing pretty good, or good enough, or better than the next guy, or at least as good as those church people. It's one of Satan's most clever tricks. Religion becomes the God. Then the rules and the traditions become the focus, and any violation of the rules indicate a lack of commitment to the institution on your part. Follow me, just throw a little rock. Will you watch with me how this plays out in these verses? I've got 3 points. I just want us to look at the Jews, at these religious, they were the religious leaders. They were the cream of the crop. They were the best that we had. The first part of verse 3 says, the Jews asking Festus to do a favor against Paul that he might summon him to Jerusalem. Can I tell you that, number one, religion will cause you to become manipulative. I just can't emphasize to you how very awkward and uncomfortable this had to be for the Jews who lived in Judea, who quite frankly hated the Romans. That's the reason they were mad at Paul to start with, because they were looking, the Old Testament said, a Messiah is going to come and be a king. And they were looking for a king to show up. And Paul was saying, the king did show up, and his name was Jesus, and he lived, and he died, and he went to heaven. And Paul said, the Jews said, no, that can't possibly be the case. If the Messiah had come, we wouldn't be under the rule of the cotton-picking Jews. That Messiah would have delivered us from the Jews. From the Romans. The Jews hated the Romans. I can't emphasize to you how uncomfortable this had to be for these religious leaders to jump in bed and claim their allegiance. Mr. Festus, procurator, sir, we will give you our allegiance and our support. Ooh, they had to have their fingers crossed or something in their back pocket for them to make a deal. Religion will cause you to become manipulative. Can I say to you that I try to be... what I mean by manipulative is it will cause me to have impure motives for doing that which I do. I try to be extremely sensitive about my motives, especially since I'm such a good person. Amen? And then there's that whole filthy rag thing back in Isaiah chapter 64. I try to be very careful what I say from right here, from the pulpit. And I try to be careful about who I ask to do what. We don't have a nominating committee. There are plenty of great things that we could do and ministries we could start, but I know they cannot come from me. 3.5, almost 4 years ago, Hope and I, we started this little church in our home because I deeply desire to share my life and my story and my testimony and my giftedness about how great God has been to me with other people. That's it. I didn't start a church so I could grow a church, but I think that every church ought to grow. It's like a baby. If you feed a baby, what does it do? Baby grows up and it causes it sometimes to say, whoa, I'm going to stop feeding you, or I'm going to put a brick on your head. I don't want you to grow up. Sometimes I feel like that about our church. I don't want us to grow. I want us to stay small. I didn't start a church so we could have a building program. I'm perfectly thrilled with exactly who the Lord has brought in our paths. I spend a great deal of time examining my motives, remembering that the heart is deceitfully wicked. I've got to check up on that in my life. Can I say to you, I deeply desire not to gun down people from the pulpit. I don't want to be that guy. Can I say to you that I wrestled really hard with this week about what message to share? It's Friend Day, and there's going to be some visitors here. And what great word can I share with them? And what great word has God given to me to share with people about Friend Day? And what great word can I have? But I just couldn't get away from this, Acts chapter 25, because this is where we've been. This is where we're at. I couldn't get away from opening God's Word from wherever we're at and allowing Him to speak to us. This is not my sermon we're discussing today. Instead, it's His Word that we're studying today. You know, this past week I heard through the grapevine that someone felt like a comment I made the other week from a pulpit was directed toward. And I went to that person and I tried to assure the person that that was not the case at all. I was reminded about the whole motive thing. Clayton, why are you doing what you're doing? Impure motives, neatly shrouded around religious activity, is a formula for a bad castle. Right. In our men's Bible study this week, we reminded of the verse that says that man looks on the outward appearance, God looks on the heart. He's not looking so much at the action, he's looking at the motive. First point, religion will make you manipulative. The end of verse 3 says this: they were preparing an ambush along the road to kill him. Point number 2, religion will fill your soul with hatred. Remember that murder is the fruit, but the seed of that fruit is hate. These were religious leaders, and they openly were the religious leaders were openly saying, we want Paul dead, because they hated him. It had been 2 years since those 40 men had made a vow to kill Paul, and no sooner was there a transition of power, the Jews tried to capitalize on that and finish the work that they vowed, and that was to kill Paul. May I say to you that on the surface a person can look very clean and upright, but in his heart he can be filled with malice, hatred, and anger. Those are the tiny seeds out of which murder grows. I've said many times lately that what we need to do is hang a sign on the wall of every wall and every door of every building in the world that says, stop killing people. Maybe thou shalt not kill. But I know that what we need is to not just stop killing people, we need to start loving. I'm not splitting hairs. Religion and love are mutually exclusive. They do not belong together. Commitment to the rules and the traditions in the institution will cause you to do ugly stuff to the people around you. Verse 7, it says, when he arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him and brought many serious charges that they were not able to prove. Point number 3, religion will make you lie. Maybe on the surface it's pretty, but beneath the surface this deceitful righteousness will cause you to fabricate the truth. Translated lie. Do you remember that a half-truth is a whole lie? It's not pretty, is it? This failure to just go ahead and recognize that you are a morally depraved, wretched, unrighteous sinner, just like the Bible says. But Clayton, where's this joy in where's the joy and the freedom in that? Well, if you just go ahead and confess or agree with God that you are unrighteous, that puts you in a perfect position to go ahead and accept His amazing grace. We see how the story turns out. Paul defends himself to Festus and says, you can see I'm not guilty. Festus says, are you willing to go to Jerusalem? Paul says, I'm standing right here in your court. This is the place I ought to be tried. I'm a Roman citizen. If you won't do that, send me to Rome to be tried before Caesar. Festus gets together with his council and says, fine. You want to go to Rome you will go. Amazingly, even though these religious folks didn't get Paul dead, think about the words the religious people were trying to kill. So I'm just offering to you today these words. Religion cannot satisfy your soul, and it will leave you woefully disillusioned. So Clayton, what are you saying? You're saying that you are a Christian and you are a pastor and you're not religious? Well, I do some things religiously. Every day, at least twice a day, every day, 7 days a week, without exception, I religiously brush my teeth. I do it every day, twice a day at least. No, Clayton, I'm talking about religious stuff. You mean like reading the Bible? Yeah, most every day I read my Bible, but it's not because I have to.
Come on.
It's because I want to hear what the God who created me and loves me and has a plan and a purpose for my life has to say to me today.
Amen.
I don't have to read my Bible, I get to read. Well, Clayton, do you pray every day? Well, yeah, pretty much I pray every day. I don't have to. Do you know that I can have a conversation, I can talk to the God who created me and loves me and has a plan and purpose for my life. I get to do that. Most days I do that. I hope every day I do that. I don't know if I've missed any days lately. Like my wife knows, I don't know if she prays or not. I know she prays for me. So Clayton, if you're not proposing religion, what are you proposing? Remember this story in Mark 12. One of the scribes approached. The scribes is a guy who knew the rules well in the Old Testament. When he had heard them debating and saw that Jesus answered everybody well, he was a great orator, the scribe asked him, okay, Jesus, on the spot, which command is the most important of all? You remember what he said, don't you? This is the most important, Jesus answered. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, there's one God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Second one's very close to it. Love your neighbor in the way that you love yourself. There is no command any greater than these, Jesus said. Can I just say to you that the command to love God, there ain't nothing religious about that. There ain't nothing religious about me just loving God. You know what? I've got 2 puppy dogs, a beagle and a Maltese. Some of you see me on the floor playing with them. I love to play with my dogs. You know what Jesus is saying? Why don't you just love God in the same way? Just love God. Can I just bring it down to today? Can I just say, Clayton, what God wants you to do is He wants you to have a barbecue with Him. Have a barbecue with God. Just get together and have a picnic. Just have a barbecue with God. And I ask myself, Clayton, of all of the activities that you have going on in your life, of all of the things that, all the 168 hours of your time, can I ask you, Clayton, how much time do you just spend just loving God? I really wish I had our little love seat up here. My favorite position to think about when I think about loving God is me sitting on the love seat with my feet propped up crossed. I'm just there. There's no heavy weight. There's no guilt and there's no shame, because you know what? Jesus took the guilt and the shame away from me. He took my unrighteousness and He made me righteous. Man, I love Him for that. Man, I love for Him doing what I couldn't do for myself. Can't religify that. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. A barbecue with God, that's the most important command. And I'm talking loud because I don't know if you hear me in the back row. Can I just ask you very gently, can you hear me back there?
Oh yeah.
We hear you.
How are you doing, loving God? Remember the story that says if God had a refrigerator, Jay, your picture would be on it. Your picture would be on the refrigerator. God had a refrigerator. God had a great big massive refrigerator, and it would have all of his little children's pictures on. That's the God we serve. That's the God who took this sinner. And I'll just tell you, he used to be very self-righteous. I'll tell you, there was a time in my life, bless God, I knew what the rules were. I knew how to walk, how to talk, how everybody else ought to walk and talk. If you didn't walk talk like I walk talk, then I had something for you. One day I failed. I've told you about the testimony many times. I was in Bible college. I was Mr. Bible College. I was going to be the next Billy Graham, and my life tanked. I failed. My world came unglued. And I realized that I had tried to keep the rules and tried to keep the rules, and I'd pressed and I'd stressed, and I had failed. I finally collapsed under the weight of the reality that I could not keep all the rules. My world fell apart. And I got all those things we get mad and ashamed and disillusioned. Fine, God, you don't want me to be the next Billy Graham. Forget that. I'm just going to go start a life for myself. And I did. I moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I started my life over. And you know what happened one day? One day I was driving in my little car, and it hit me. This song, Brandon, you are so good. You're so good to me. I didn't deserve it. I failed and I messed up. But it's not about my performance. It's about His grace.
Amen.
It calls me to say, I'm done with all that religious stuff. I don't want that. I don't want to try to know the rules and try to make sure Jay keeps them. What a heavy weight that is.
Come on.
So I just want to ask you gently. I sound loud like I'm trying to. How are you doing? I hope you're loving God good. I hope that you're sensing that God loves you really, really good. I'm not splitting hairs because I've lived it. I've been on that end. And now I find myself on this end. Under the water fountain. His amazing grace.
Amen.
Second rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. And may I ask you the question, when was the last time you had a barbecue with your neighbor? You know, Jesus told us, He said, husbands, wives, love each other. Husbands, love your wives. In another place, the Bible says, remember Jesus told us, Clayton, love your enemies. When's the last time, Clayton, you had a barbecue and invited your enemies? You had a barbecue with your enemies. So, Clayton, when was the last time you had a barbecue with God? Well, it happened yesterday. I got up yesterday morning and I headed to Columbia, South Carolina, the hottest place on earth. And I left and it was early in the morning. And some of you know that I was going to Columbia, South Carolina because I was going to take a test to be a general contractor, because God has given us acreage as a church and we're going to have the opportunity to build some kind of a complex. And if I get my general contractor's license and we pull our permits, we can save ourselves lots of money. And for those of you who know my history, at one point in my life I had a general contractor's license and I passed the test. And so the other day I took one of those silly classes where they prepare you for the test, and I got in my truck yesterday morning well before dawn and I was going to Columbia, South Carolina to take this test so I could get my contractor's license so I could help our church. And I failed the test.
That's all right.
It's a true story. I failed the test. And early yesterday morning I was driving down the interstate and it was still dark because I left early in the morning making commitment for my church. It was still dark outside, and I was driving along, and it was just me and God. Until I started getting some texts from some of you saying, this was before dawn, it's still dark outside, that's the silhouette of the moon. Some of you started texting me saying, we're praying for you, Clayton. And I walked into this test saying, my church is praying for me. There's no way I can't not pass this test. I was driving down the road feeling like it was just me and God, and I looked out the window, and I saw the silhouette of the moon, and at the bottom of the silhouette of the moon, there was the most beautiful crescent, quarter crescent, sitting there at the bottom of the moon. And I knew that God smiled. And I want to say to you, I kind of get teared up sometimes. Hope will tell you, by and large, I'm not an emotional person. I'm a facts and data guy. I want to see it written down. If God's going to answer a prayer, I want it to be rock-worthy. I want us to know, Josh, that God has done something special in our lives. And when He has, I want to grab a rock and I want to write it down. Does anybody doubt that God has done a great work in Josh's life these last couple of weeks?
Amen.
I'm a facts and data guy. I'm driving down the road yesterday, and I knew that God was smiling. And I had a barbecue with God. And I walked into the test center, and I took the test, and I hit the last question, and it immediately scores it, said, fail. I mean, it's instant feedback. You don't have to wonder whether you passed or failed. I failed. I got packed in my truck yesterday, and I rode home, and I thought, man, I sure wish the smiley face was still out. The sun was out. It's 112 degrees or whatever it is in Columbia, the hottest place on earth. And I drove back home. And on my way home, my conversation with God was, you know, I could have been angry at the test. I could have been angry at the guy who didn't prepare me well enough. I could have been angry at myself for failing. I could have just, God, why'd you set me up like this? You know what? I'm trying. Clayton is trying in his life to train himself to believe what the Bible says about Clayton, that God loves Clayton. Period. Not God loves Clayton if, or God loves Clayton because it is God loves Clayton. So on my way home, my conversation with God was, God, well, I tried. We're praying for zero rent, God. You've given us some property. Our church is praying for zero rent because we want to write that on a great big rock that God did something very special in our lives. And God, I was just down there trying to help you out. God, I guess you don't need my help.
Right.
Because if I passed the test and we pulled the permit and saved a lot of money because I got my license, then God helped you out. But you know what? God, He doesn't really need my help.
Right.
He owns 1,000 hills, and He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and He can sell a few of them on my behalf if He desires to. And then I get in the car and I start texting some of y'all, the elders. I say, elders, I failed. Can't tell you. I love to read you some of the texts that said, no, you didn't fail, you can't fail. Because it's not about your performance. It's about the fact that God loves you in spite of your performance. Can I just ask you, have you had a barbecue with God lately? The second rule was to love your neighbor. When's the last time you had a barbecue with an enemy? Jesus commanded us to actively love other folks. Thou shalt have a barbecue with thy neighbor. And I mean it. That's what the disciples heard. In fact, Jesus said, all right, guys, this was near the end of His life. I got another rule for you, a new command. And they're thinking, oh, great, another command? What is that? I give you a new command. Love. Just like for the last 3.5 years, I have loved you. I'm giving you a command. Jay, you got to go love people. Next verse, you remember this verse? I've quoted it many times. By this shall all people know that you're my disciples, if you love each other. Why did we buy a little inflatable movie screen? So we can hang out together. Why do I want a playground so badly for our church? So we can hang out together. Why are we having friend day together? So we can share barbecue with our friends. Why am I so big on us having small groups at our homes? So we can have barbecues with our friends every single week. I this, y'all want men to know that you're my disciple. If you love each other, if you like each other, you get along with each other, you hang out with each other. The mission statement of Church 247 is this: helping people move from where they are to where God wants them to be, starting with me. That's our mission statement. How do we intend to get there? By doing stuff together that would cause people to make this statement. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that? If you're a guest today, can I just say thank you for coming to have part of this time with us today. What's my challenge to you today? I have two challenges. Number one, thou shalt love God more. It's the most important thing that you can pursue in your life. The most important, the first and greatest commandment is that Clayton spends his time on earth learning how to love God the most. If you're here today and you say, it's been a long time since I've had a conversation with God. It's been a long time since I've felt God's love. Can I say to you today, God is saying, I love you. I haven't forgotten about you. I'm not angry with you. I love you. My second challenge, if you're currently not involved in the church family, can I strongly encourage you to drive up and down the highway, maybe around the county, and visit some churches and pick a group of messed up, dysfunctional, don't have it all together, sometimes religious people. Devote yourself to them. Can I just say to you that you all are the group of messed up, dysfunctional, don't have it all together people that I've devoted myself to. Y'all are people I've devoted myself to. Can I say that to you all, that sometimes, probably some of you all have hurt my feelings. Can I say to you that probably sometimes I have hurt your feelings. But you know what? I have devoted myself. I know that you're going to mess up. I know you're going to mess up because I messed up. And I've just decided that whenever somebody messes up, I'm just going to go to them and say, Jay, are you okay? How can I help you? I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. That what you said made me angry. I'm devoted to those people. Can I just say to you today that if you're not involved in church, just go find you some group of messed up people like we are and devote yourself to them. You need them. Am I promoting a love fest? Almost. Years ago, there was a story told of a great theologian who had written volumes of theology. And he was standing in front of the stage and he was delivering an address to an audience. And one fellow from the back raised his hand and said, Sir, Mr. Theologian, you've devoted your life to theology. Can you sum your theology up in just a sentence or two? And the man thought about it for a minute and he said, yes, I can. Jesus loves me. Yes, I know. Because the Bible